First of all, just to say, the definition of a cull is a selective slaughter of animals. And I'm not sure what a voluntary cull is, but the motion speaks of 200,000 dairy cows being culled. That indeed would be a shocking sight and a shocking policy if it was true. The problem is that it's not true, and from what I can see, no amount of anger, conspiracy theories, or mixing up the idea of a slaughter with the idea of reduction over time makes it true. There is very much to be angry about, but yet again, these deputies prefer to get angry about an imaginary policy and ignore the real dangers to urban and to rural Ireland. There's much in agricultural policy in this state that you should be angry about, and the motion hints at it, correctly pointing out that the reason we have a dairy herd of the size we do is deliberate government policy over the last decade or more. And that's why we as a nation, have created markets abroad that did not hitherto exist for dairy products. We've created markets, we haven't fed the world, and we haven't created lucrative and profitable markets for any other than a small cohort, and often directly in competition with local and indigenous food suppliers in other countries. That market has been lucrative for some in the processing and some in large agribusiness interests. It may have rewarded a small cohort of dairy farmers as well, but it certainly, most certainly, has benefited the Goodman Group, who AgriLand reported has seen 27% increase in their profits in just one of their firms in 2022, and its revenue increased by 75% to 620 million. The continuation of the status quo means continuing with the policy that, for example, in just 9 companies in the Goodman Group can make a profit of 170 million, have assets worth more than 3.4 billion, but file their accounts in Luxembourg and ensure that the bulk of the profits were largely untaxed. And they are not alone. But I'd argue that the vast majority of farmers have not done well from the policy of this state. The farmers, for example, in the beef plan movement, or the tens of thousands whose incomes are so low that it would be illegal if we applied the minimum wage criteria. If you look at the huge discrepancy in farm incomes and farm sizes, we can see why there would be anger, and a lot of anger, in rural Ireland. If you look at the figures for the decline in family farms, you understand the sense of decline and the feelings of threat that many feel. But it's odd then that the deputies here, and the government deputies who tell us that they represent rural Ireland, are the ones who most staunchly defend the current status quo. Yes, they are resisting change of any sort, but what in the name of God are they doing defending the current policies and the position that have led rural Ireland into the situation that it finds itself in today? The decline in biodiversity, the pollution of our rivers and waterways are not the only things that are worth getting angry about. And I've seen debates here over the years about rural post offices shutting down and services being cut and transport links being cut and villages left isolated. And these are very well worth getting angry about. And last week we heard of women who have to search across several counties in rural Ireland for a GP willing to provide reproductive care, and many of them having to travel to cities and towns to find that care. That is worth getting angry about. Are the profits of Goodman and others, when they are seen side by side with the struggles of poverty of many farmers, is that not worth getting angry about? No, it seems that the anger is reserved for any attempt to stop polluting rivers and lakes, or any suggestion that climate change is real and something must be done to reduce our emissions in the face of the greatest threat to humanity today. It's extraordinary to me that a motion that proposes that we continue to allow nitrates at present level use, when later today we'll be discussing an EPA report which directly links the use of nitrates, especially in the south and the southeast, with the decline in water quality and the huge environmental damage that ensues. And that affects rural Ireland and its population most. Yet the representatives of rural Ireland here want to continue with that policy and to allow continued pollution of rivers and lakes. This motion speaks of anger and fear in rural Ireland. It tells us of policies that have led to anger and fear, and then tells us that the answer is to keep on doing what we're doing, keep on with the policies that enrich the Goodmans, the Dawn Meats, the large agribusiness and threaten the future to family farms, sustainable agriculture and add to the climate chaos that we face. As large parts of humanity experience record heat waves, record temperatures, floods and droughts, and records are broken daily, we're told in this motion things are grand. Let them continue as they are. It tells us reducing nitrate is a bigger threat to rural Ireland than climate change. It tells us cutting the dairy herd numbers is an unimaginable horror, just as we see real unimaginable horrors across the globe from climate change. And under the guise of defending ordinary farmers, it wants to defend the status quo that has proved so lucrative for a tiny minority and threatens the majority of farmers, of workers, of humanity. And yes, farmers must be at the forefront of deciding how and what changes we need. But what we have here is a Trojan horse, a motion that pretends to have concern for the fears of ordinary farmers, but in reality is about preserving the status quo, the inequality and the precarious living that the farming communities may feel. We need a new deal on food and farming and a new just transition for the farmers affected. The status quo in a time of crisis cannot hold. Neither can allowing food policy be dictated by large business interests who have no concern for ordinary farmers or the environment, but only concern for their own profit margins. We need to pay and reward farmers for adopting sustainable food production, and we need to prioritise food sovereignty in this state. I have no doubt that that is what ordinary farmers want too. I know they see through the Green Party policies that would try to target ordinary people's behaviour while leaving the corporate and business elite untouched. But I would urge all those concerned who are concerned with the crisis we face to differentiate between the fake moralism that we see here and the class snobbery of the Green Party, and the fact that climate change is real, it's here and it's happening now. Dealing with that should mean greater security for farmers and rural communities, not less. It should mean a real future for family farms and sustainable agriculture, not less. It should not mean business as usual and the continuation of a system that yields millions and millions in profits for the Larry Goodmans of this world and others in the food processing industry, while leaving rural communities and farmers at the mercy of continued precarity and uncertainty.